Hi, and thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Jacqueline.
And I'm your host, Nicole. Welcome to Perfictionist, where we share our passion for reading one story at a time.
Today, we're rolling out the red carpet for our very own Perfictionist Book Awards.
That's right! Over the past year, we have read, loved, laughed, cried, and maybe even thrown a book or two across the room. And now it is time to celebrate the stories, authors, and characters that made 2024 unforgettable.
From the most swoon-worthy couples to the most shocking plot twists, we're handing out awards in categories that are as fun and diverse as our reading list.
Whether you're here to discover your next favorite book or relive some of your own reading highlights, we hope you enjoyed this special year-end episode. Let's dive in and crown the best of 2024. So we'll start off with some general awards. First being Best Book of 2024. So your overall favorite read of the year. For me, I have to say The House on the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. I thought it was just so funny and heartfelt, and just overall love the message that, like, just because things are always done a certain way doesn't mean that's the right way to do them, perhaps, maybe.
Now that I've heard you mention this a few times, I'm for sure going to read that book this year. I feel like it's now a must. Yes.
I would highly recommend it.
Wonderful. For myself, The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. The world building is beautifully crafted. The characters are so vivid and compelling. It was really difficult for me to put the book down. And it was very masterful in the storytelling. It was a super immersive and, in my opinion, very unforgettable.
And that is definitely one going on my reading list for this year.
So, runner-up book of 2024. So our second place standout. I'll go first. So for me, it was Bride by Ali Hazelwood.
I love Ali Hazelwood.
I know. I just thought it was very amusing. I liked her different sort of approach to the vampire thing. And I like the shock factor value that comes into play later on. I enjoy being shocked. I sometimes don't know how I feel about necessarily what I'm reading, but if it's shocked me, I'm like, ooh, I'm receiving a shock.
It's making me feel some sort of way.
Exactly. Like, the shock factor didn't take away from my enjoyment. It's light and it's fun, but Ali Hazelwood's a good writer.
Mm-hmm. No,
Yeah.
I absolutely love her, as you will come to see later on. And I very much enjoyed that book as well. For me, my second place or runner-up is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabriella Zevin. This book ended up being so much more than I was expecting it to be. On the surface, you think it's just about two people who are like creating video games, but in reality, it's about the complexities of friendship, and you go on quite the journey with this book. And I thought it was really interesting.
Cool.
New to you author. Best new to you author. Celebrating a debut of a newly discovered author. And for me, anyone who listens to the podcast regularly or for the last 10 seconds will not be surprised that my pick is Ali Hazelwood. I am obsessed with her style of humor and have read or listened to like her young adult books, her adult books, both like novels and novellas, and I have not come across a dud yet.
I would have to say the same. Like, there's so many books now for me to discover. I've only read a couple of her books, but I feel the vibe and I enjoy her writing. She's got a good sense of humor.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think I only have 2, maybe 3 books of hers I have not read, but she doesn't have like a huge, is it discography? Is that what you use for books?
I actually don't know.
Huge collection. I don't know what it's called. But yeah, so I only have a few more, and I probably will end up reading them hopefully this year.
Favorite series of the year, the best multi-book journey. Okay, so I read quite a few series this year. I did not finish a series that sort of I thought would be good enough to make this like designation. In fact, I DNF'd quite a few series this year. So I'm
really?
not. Yes, I did. Sadly. There was some I was like 5 books deep in. I had to DNF.
That is just
So
like so. That's good. That is good that you're like, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore. I'm done. I feel like I would be like, nope, I'll just keep pushing through. And it's like, I'm just wasting my time.
yeah, I did try to push through. You even gave me a pep talk at one point.
I know, don't listen to me. I'm like the worst. I'll just be like, just keep going.
I tried, but I started to feel like I don't know. I hated it so much I had to stop.
As you should. If you are not enjoying something, then just stop.
Oh man, and there was a few series like that. That one that I'm talking about, I was choked because I really enjoyed the first few books.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, anyway, I don't want to like name it because that doesn't seem fair
Yeah.
to that writer, because I know a lot of people enjoyed that series.
Exactly.
But because The City of Brass is part of a trilogy, I have faith in that author. Her writing is so incredible. It's just very mature compared to a lot of the stuff I've been reading, which is like my own fault. But anyway. And so I would probably say, I'm going to say, for recommendation purposes, and also because I have spoken to someone else who finished this trilogy and they said it was fantastic, and I trust them, the Devabad trilogy by S.A. Chakraborty. That trilogy, I hear, is very good, and I have read part of it, and I would say it is quite good so far. Yeah.
Yeah, I have also heard a lot of very good things about it and just haven't gotten to it. One that I did start and finish and absolutely adored was The Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer. And it is fun and like relatively lighthearted. Like I think there is some more serious things that go on within the story, but they keep the topics lighthearted, and it's super adventurous, just very family friendly, super cute. If you like
Nice.
sci-fi, you like fairy tale retellings, I definitely recommend it. Moving on to our character awards.
Mm-hmm.
Best protagonist, the main character who left a lasting impression. And I found this question so difficult. It was the hardest question for me. It took me, I didn't even come up with an answer until like just before we started recording. I've been thinking about it for like 24 hours. Not straight. Obviously, I thought of other things in between, but it's been in the back of my brain for like the last 24 hours. And so after thinking about it, I have to say Tiernan, I think is how you pronounce her name, Tiernan DeHaas from Credence by Penelope Douglas. And it's a very, very controversial book. And I can see why people like dislike it with a passion. But I think if you read it from the mindset of like a psychological analysis, then I think you can get a lot out of this book. But it is definitely it's not for everyone. But I thought her character was very interesting from a psychological perspective. And I thought about this character for a very, very long time after reading this book. Like the character, the whole plot of this was on my mind for a very long time. And not like the spicy scenes or anything like that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm specifically talking about the psychological aspects.
Yeah. Interesting. For me, it was Oren from the Plated Prisoner series by Raven Kennedy. She's got some unique qualities. And when I was thinking about what main character, and I'm not saying like lasting impression, just lasting impression, it's neither inherently good nor bad, right?
Yeah.
This is a character I thought about a lot when I wasn't reading. So I would say it was Oren. So moving on to best antagonist, a compelling or unforgettable villain. Literally could not think of anybody this year.
Oh no.
I know, no villain stood out to me this year.
That's really sad.
Mm-hmm. I know.
I'm like, I don't know how to feel about that for you. Maybe we just aren't reading the types of books where like the villains are like,
okay, so like if we compare
out?
it to like Harry Potter, there was a very clear villain, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a bunch of little minor villains underneath the big villain.
Yeah.
Or like Lord of the Rings or something. It's very clear, right? Like, but the types of books I was reading this year, it wasn't so like cut and dry.
Yes. As I was answering this question, I kept thinking about the fantasy books I've read. because I
Mm-hmm.
feel like fantasy, especially fantasy series, tend to have really good villains because
Mm-hmm.
there's somebody, it's like over the course of several books that the protagonist is trying to defeat or overcome. So then it's like you really like learn a lot more about the villain.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think they tend to be more interesting and more unforgettable. So that makes sense. I actually picked somebody who is not into fantasy, surprisingly. And it might be because I recently read this book, so it's like fresh on my brain.
Yeah.
But it's called None Shall Sleep by Ellie Marney. And there's a character named Simon, and he's a teenage sociopath. So it's just very like intriguing and morbidly fascinating character. So if you are someone who really likes true crime, I think this would be a very like I absolutely love this read. I could not put it down. It was so good in my opinion. I actually gave it 5 stars, and part of it was because the villain in it was just so intriguing.
Oh, okay. Well, that sounds like a good qualifier for this category. Okay, so best supporting character, a side character who stole the show.
For me, we actually did something similar partway through the year where we talked about kind of like our best of. And I think this is the same character I picked then. But
Mm,
honestly, I like tried to think like, is there someone else who I read about in the second half of the year who stands out more? And no one can beat Aiko from the Lunar Chronicles. She is hands down my favorite side character. I find her
nice.
hilarious and so like I loved like I bounced between audiobooks and reading, and specifically the person who did the audiobooks, just the way she acted this character was top notch.
Nice. That's awesome. It's so nice when you find somebody like who's a good audiobook narrator. It makes such a difference in my opinion to like the story. Like I've done some stories where I've read the physical copy and then I've also listened to the audiobook, and I find the audio narration sometimes almost low key ruins it. But
Yeah.
maybe that's also because like you form your own ideas in your mind when you read it yourself first.
No, it definitely could either make or break a story.
Yeah. So mine was Azrael from A Court of Mist and Fury.
Mm-hmm. Any reason why he stood out to you?
Well, I enjoyed his attitude at and spoilers for A Court of Mist and Fury, but I enjoyed how he acted at the High Lords meeting.
No,
It made
he.
me step back for a second and go, "Oh." It made me notice him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I don't really think that's too big of a spoiler, but yeah, it.
Yeah.
I enjoy him as a side character as well.
Okay. So our favorite romantic couple, the most swoon-worthy pair. I had put down here like, "Oh, look out, spoilers for Crescent City 2, The House of Sky and Breath." And then I was like, well, Nikki hasn't read this yet, so I don't want to spoil it for you either. So I'm actually not going to say the couple's name or like who's all involved because
Yeah.
but let's just say Rune Danan and his love interest.
I'm actually going to do the same thing where I'm not going to say both people's names just in case.
Okay.
But I appreciate you not only saying it verbally, but also not putting it in the notes. So thank you very much. And for me, I'm currently reading A Court of Silver Flames. So it's the love interests in that book. I'll just leave
Hmm.
it at that.
They are I enjoy them together.
Mhm.
Yes.
I'm very much enjoying their banter and just the way they kind of like lift each other up. We're early on in the book, so I don't know how it's going to progress, but
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah, it's kind of in a cheeky phase right now. Favorite friendship, a platonic relationship that warmed your heart. For myself, it is The Women from the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. And I just have to say, do not ever scorn a book club. That's your warning. That's all I'll say on that.
Wow. Wow. Sounds ominous. What has
Such a good
happened?
book.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
actually really enjoyed this book. It's the author has also wrote like I can't remember the title of it, but like My Best Friend's Exorcism or Exorcism of My Best Friend, something like that, where it's about teenagers and one of them needs an exorcism, or
Oh,
they think
wow.
they do or something. And I listened to both of them. And I actually preferred this one a little bit more, but maybe it's because the women are more like my age, and I don't know. I'm getting old. I'm relating more to
You relate
the
to
women's
it.
book club than the
Right.
children running around haunted houses.
Right. Yes. I have noticed a shift in my preferences as well. And I was like, wow, I think this is like, yeah, just like the aging things. It's happening.
Oh no.
Yeah, none came to mind for me for
Oh,
friendships, sadly. I
yeah.
need to read some better books. Like,
Well, I don't think it's you need to read better books. I think it's just different books.
yeah.
If you're like really into something and that's just not part of what you're into at the moment,
Yeah, I guess so.
then yeah.
So, best romance novel. And this actually, when I was reflecting on this particular one, I was shocked because romance is my favorite genre. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really read many romances this year, if any. Like most of it was stories that have a romance subplot.
Yeah.
So that being said, I'm going to again go with City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty, simply because the way that the romance is entwined, it is important to the story. And the way that it is done but it's very like low key. It's
Mm-hmm.
very, I don't know how to how to explain it. It's like very sweet and endearing, like
Oh.
in a way that I think could make you fall in love with the love interest
Mm-hmm.
without it, but like, and there's enough heat, but not anything explicit. Like if they were to like hold hands, it'd be like, oh my goodness. But it's done in a
Oh.
way, and like as we'll mention later, we've read some pretty raunchy books here, and
Mm-hmm.
but the way that this is done, there's still like all of that romantic, I want to say, tension,
Yeah.
but without any of that.
Oh, that is really cool. Like, yeah, because not everyone likes the steamy scenes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good to know that there like are stories out there that kind of give you the same feeling
Mm-hmm.
without anything explicit happening. Because
Mm-hmm.
yeah, not everyone's into that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's good to know is not only a excellently written trilogy, but
Mm-hmm.
also has that
Right.
beautiful
So,
romance.
but I've also only read the first book, but that was sort of the vibe I was getting, was like it's probably not going to turn into something really explicit, but maybe
So we
because of
can't
like,
say for sure
I
because
can't say
it
for sure
might
because
get
I've
more
only read.
explicit.
That's right. But
Gotcha.
I don't, I have a feeling, and I will let you know if I am wrong when I find out. But I have a feeling that maybe that's just not in like something the author's interested in doing, but
Yeah.
we'll see.
Romance was actually my most read genre this year. And so it was hard for me just to pick like one story for this, but I'm going to go with Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. I found the love story and the two main characters to be quite unique. There is one other book that I found similarly, like the dynamics of the characters, I found very similar. It's called Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. And so I think if you've read one of the books, so say you've read Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, then I would suggest reading Half a Soul if you specifically liked the dynamic between the two main characters. They're
Mm-hmm.
very different books. The stories are very different, but I just found the way the characters kind of relate to each other to be similar. But
Mm.
of the two, Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies was my, I guess, favorite of the two, although they were both
Nice.
great.
Aw, cool. I'm gonna
Yeah.
have to check those out. That sounds really interesting.
And they are both very like wholesome love stories
I love
as
that.
well. Best science fiction or fantasy book. The top escapes into another world. And for myself, it is House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune, which was also my favorite book of the year. And it is a fantasy book. So I think if it's
Mm-hmm.
my favorite book and it's fantasy, therefore it just has to be my favorite fantasy.
It's the ultimate best of the year. And mine is, of course, going to The City of Brass by
Yeah.
S.A. Chakraborty, of course.
I mean, if we pick something different, then it wouldn't really make
Yes.
sense.
I do want to say, though, in terms of escaping into another world, at least the first couple, if not the first 3 books of the Plated Prisoner series, I was very immersed in.
Mhm.
So the first 2 are called first one's called Guild, and the second one's called Glint, and they're by Raven Kennedy. And
Mhm.
again, like, I know a lot of people loved that series, so I don't think I could really go amiss by necessarily recommending a couple of those ones.
I definitely want to attempt that series myself, but I feel like it is a longer series, so I'm holding off just because there are some other series that are higher up on my kind of want to read list.
So moving on to the best thriller or mystery, the most suspenseful and gripping tale for me was The River at Night by Erica Ferencik. It's about a group of women who are longtime friends. They do not win the best friendship award.
Oh no.
But every year, I think it is, or whatever, and I guess think it's annually, they meet up and they do something adventurous together. And
Mhm.
so they all have their lives in different places of, I think the States is probably where they're based or whatever. And then they'll come together at least once a year as friends and do something crazy.
Ooh, that sounds
S-
interesting.
Yeah, so for this particular time that they got together, they wanted to go river rafting.
Mhm. But things go amiss.
Well, you could say that.
All right.
Yes. I think that's a fair statement to make.
Well, now I'm even more intrigued.
Yeah.
Oh. For
Yeah.
myself, I picked None Shall Sleep by Ellie Marney, which I mentioned was also my pick for best villain. And the villain is the teenage sociopath, and the story is about the FBI recruiting 2 teenagers to kind of head up a special division where teenagers help the FBI capture
Oh, fun.
teenager sociopaths.
That's fun.
So it's fun, but it does get very, very graphic. So you need to be someone who is interested in true crime, but
Hmm.
the kind of premise, and you have to be able to kind of suspend disbelief about the whole teenagers working for the FBI thing. If you can't
Yes.
get over that, then you're going to hate the story.
That's why I
But
was
if you
literally
can
like,
just
that's
like,
fun.
yeah.
Then you go on to like talk about it. And I'm like, oh, it sounds like it's really dark.
It's kind of a mix, and it's set in the 80s, and the like 80s vibes are just like on point. Best contemporary fiction, a standout in modern setting. I have already mentioned Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin as my overall runner up. So technically that would be my favorite, but I do want to give a different option just to kind of shake things up. And so I'm going to say If He Had Been With Me by Laura Nowen. And I have previously talked about this book. It's about 2 teenagers and they know each other from birth. They're like, their parents are best friends, so then they kind of grow up together because their parents live next door to each other, and like they're not raised as brother and sister by any capacity, but they're around each other as much as brothers and sisters would be around each other. And they kind of grow apart and then grow back together, and it's very, very heartbreaking, lovely story.
Aw. That sounds nice. Mine is very simple novella selection. It was between Bride or this one, but I was like, well, I've already talked about Bride, so I'm gonna go for this one because I really enjoyed it. It's The Witch Queen of Halloween by Cressley Cole, and it does take place in the modern times, but I'm like, does this count? Because it's a dilapidated haunted mansion that's like abandoned is where it takes place.
Yeah. I guess the setting is technically a modern setting, but like the genre of the book was probably like it's paranormal romance, I would guess
Yeah.
would be like the specific genre, but I think it counts. It's a modern setting.
Okay. So, best nonfiction read, the most enlightening or impactful nonfiction book. So Quiet, for me, my selection is Quiet by Susan Cain, which explores the strengths of introverts in a world that often celebrates extroversion. It's a must-read for understanding and embracing the power of quieter personalities.
Oh, I love
Mhm.
that.
It really resonated with me too because of my heritage. I have some Japanese heritage. And so she kind of goes into the cultural implications of how that can affect different households. And it just like resonated so deeply. I was like, wow, this is it's an incredible book. I highly recommend.
That's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't read a lot of like, all of my nonfiction books were like more like memoirs, biographies, that kind of
Mm,
thing.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
One I went with, Beyond the Wand, The Magic and Mayhem of Growing Up a Wizard by Tom Felton. And I would say if you are a millennial and you are obsessed with Harry Potter, or like not even obsessed, if you are someone who grew up with Harry Potter and was interested in that world at any point in time, or are currently interested in it, this is an interesting read. If you have
Mm.
absolutely no interest in Harry Potter, you will not enjoy this. Moving on to our next category, fun and unique. Our
Ooh.
first section is biggest emotional roller coaster. And so a book that made you laugh, cry, and feel everything in between. And for myself, I picked Hunting Adeline. I just wanted to be super clear.
Yes.
Because when we did our episode, I said Haunting Adeline so many times. But I'm specifically referring to Hunting Adeline by H.D. Carlton.
Yes.
And yeah, it gives all the feels.
Wow. Yes, that makes sense. After our discussion, that makes sense. I can't think of a single one. I am sitting here feeling a little frustrated about that because I know I was laying in bed at least a couple times this year, or well, this past year, where I was like crying because of something that had happened in a book.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't remember what the story was. So I'm
Oh,
like, I don't know if it was just that particular moment or whatever in the story, but maybe the overall story didn't make a huge impact on me. I will mention one, and it's kind of a little bit cheating because I read this one at the end of like 2023. But
mm-hmm.
like, I want to say, like, aside from City of Brass, like the one that I think took me on the hugest emotional roller coaster was Crescent City 1, the
Mm-hmm.
first book.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that checks out. I feel like Sarah J. Maas books are often a roller coaster of emotions.
Hmm.
And like, if it weren't for Hunting Adeline, I probably would have picked one of the books from the ACOTAR series just because I
Right.
tend to go through a lot of emotions while reading her books.
Yes.
But I do have to say, like, because this year I've been slowly working my way through A Court of Thorns and Roses series, and I haven't found it as much of a roller coaster as Throne of Glass. Like,
Mm-mm.
that book will hold a special place in my heart forevermore, or like
Yeah.
the series as a
Well,
whole.
the two series are very different. Like, I like to
Very.
refer to A Court of Thorns and Roses series as like fantasy light because it's more romantasy. It's more like it's definitely focused on like what's going on in their problems in the world, but it's not nearly as in depth as the Throne of Glass series.
It is definitely like the fantasy elements and the romance elements are very balanced, where
Hmm.
like it's just as much about the relationships as it is about what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
Whereas with Throne of Glass, it is about what's going on in the world and the romance is just sprinkled in.
Yes, exactly. I think A Court of Thorns and Roses is a really good series if you really enjoy romance and you're curious about fantasy, but you're like, oh, I don't want to commit to like a massive, complicated series in a world I can't understand. I
Mhm.
think that's why A Court of Thorns and Roses has resonated with so many people because
Yeah.
it is fantasy, but I want to say it's like fantasy light.
No, I think that is definitely a good description of it.
So the best audiobook experience. And I'm just looking at my notes here and I don't think I can talk about this one because I don't actually have that many good things to say about it.
Oh no.
Yeah, so I actually didn't listen to very many audiobooks this year. I focused more on physical copies. Um, so I'm gonna just hand this one over to you to take it away.
I do think we have to acknowledge the sad truth that it can be very hard to find an audiobook reader that you
Hmm.
thoroughly enjoy.
Hmm.
So I do think this one is a very tricky question. And I had already previously mentioned that I thought the Lunar Chronicles were read well. But for me, the best, and like really the only other one that I was like really, really impressed by the way that the narrator read it was Somewhere Beyond the Sea by TJ Klune, which is the second book. So the first one is The House on the Cerulean Sea, and the second book is Somewhere Beyond the Sea. So I read the first book and then I listened to the audio of the second.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost was like, if the same narrator did the first one, I would almost suggest just listening to it because he does such an amazing job with the voice acting. It was
Oh.
incredible. Like completely different voices and cadence for every single character. And there's like a bunch of characters, and the characters are so lively and have such strong personalities that to hear that in the way he narrates them, it just made it even funnier, even more heartfelt. Like I absolutely 100% would suggest listening to these.
I have a question for you. So I've only really listened to audiobooks aside from a few like nonfictions. The nonfictions were narrated by men. But most of the books that I've listened to in Audible are narrated by women.
Same.
How do they like handle the female voices?
I've only like listened to a couple that have been narrated by men as well. And this particular narrator, Daniel Henning, I don't know if I mentioned his name, Daniel Henning, I thought he did a very good job with the female voices. So he's obviously a very talented vocalist and able
Mm-hmm.
to like change his voice in quite dramatic ways. But I think just the same as when you're listening to a female trying to do a sexy man voice,
Yeah.
listening to a man trying to do
Does he go higher pitched? Like, is he like,
he does
oh no, no?
incredible things with his voice. Not only does he
Oh
change his
wow.
pitch, but he changes like the tone, like everything about his voice changes. He gives certain characters lisp. He gives certain ones like
Wow.
accents.
He's
Like,
like properly voice acting.
yeah, he is an actor with his,
Cool.
like, he's acting with his voice. It is incredible.
I'm so curious now. I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
check that out.
Maybe I'm overselling it. And now people are going to be like, it's not as good as your, like, so
No, or maybe you're giving the proper appreciation.
yeah, I personally am just like absolutely fawning over the job that this person did. But at the same time, I don't want to set expectations too high. Like he is a single person doing all these
Yeah.
roles.
No, that's really cool. So moving on to best cover design.
Yeah, visual, stunning, or creative color. And for me, I was just kind of going with like what I was scrolling through, and I was like, okay, what catches my eye of all the things that I read? And it's the duology. We Set the Dark on Fire and We Unleash the Merciless Storm by, and I cannot pronounce this name, but Taylor K. Mejia. I am terribly sorry if that is very wrong. They were incredibly colorful. So it's kind of like a black base,
Ooh.
but then like super, super vibrant and colorful colors within it. And then the story itself is interesting. It's like a fantasy world that is being created. And I just really enjoyed like how the world was created and the different aspects of the world. I listened to these back at the very, very beginning of the year, so almost a year ago now. So I can't remember all the details, but I remember being like immediately just enthralled with kind of like the politics of the world.
Yes, that's really cool. For the cover design, I had written down here the House of Flame and Shadow, but I want to just say all of the Crescent City covers are phenomenal
Yes.
artwork.
They're
All of them.
beautiful.
I have spent so much time just sitting there admiring the detail and creativity that went into these covers.
Oh, I 100% agree. I did not read these books, so I could not put that on, but I 100% agree. They are absolutely stunning.
The most rereadable book, a story you'd pick up again in a heartbeat. And I'm just going to go ahead and just get it over with. The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty.
Oh, that's great, though. And for mine, I went with A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. This year alone, I read it and listened to the audiobook, and I can see myself like revisiting not only A Court of Thorns and Roses, but all the other books in the series. I just know I'll want to revisit the series to like see if there's any details or clues. Like, I think I'll pick up on so much more if I read it again. All right. So The Guiltiest Pleasure, a book you could not put down even if you didn't want to admit it. So, all right, let's get to it. I'm already feeling a little embarrassed and like I shouldn't be mentioning this, but if we're being honest, it would be Morning Glory Milking Farm by C.M. Nascosta. I'm not sure. I actually thought it was really well written. Putting the content aside.
It is. She's a good writer.
She's a really good writer, and I'm not going to lie, I kind of fell in love with the world that the story takes place in. It is so enchanting and charming.
I know.
Despite the content of the series.
Yes.
I don't know if I'll read anymore because it is a series.
Yeah.
But, I mean, who knows?
So I did read a few more.
Oh, you did?
I read 2 more, and it's not like they're standalones, but they're in a series. So I feel like it's like they're in the same town, but with different people. Like, yeah, like aside from the content, because it's extremely raunchy. Okay, I don't know if I've ever read anything so raunchy in my life. The writing is actually good. Like, you will come across raunchy stuff where the writing is terrible. And so it's like, this is just overall really bad. But the writing is actually good, and the characters are actually kind of endearing. I actually just read one like 2 nights ago. The characters were some of the most, that might have been the cutest couple of the year. Somehow she makes it really cute despite the like extremely R-rated content.
Yes. Yes, it's actually a skill, like a very impressive skill.
I've never read anything like it. Like where you have like this super endearing, it almost reminds me of like how endearing the characters can be from Molly Harper. But then you have this other quality that is like so insanely graphic. So, most memorable quote, a line that has stuck with you long after reading. So this one I thought was nice. Resonated for me, might resonate for you, might not. Spend your free time the way you like, not the way you think you're supposed to. Susan Cain in Quiet.
Oh, I love that. Yes. I think lots of people need to hear that.
I think so, yeah. Like, there's such a, I don't know, just the way our society and culture is, it's like, everyone feels like they need to be productive 100% of the time. And I know myself, I take that way too far. So that for me is like a good one to remember. And then Everyone Shines Given the Right Lighting. Again, Susan Cain, Quiet.
Yeah, this sounds like it is an incredible book. And just it's going to make you feel so good after reading.
It's a really good one.
I tried to make a point of writing down quotes, and I ended up with 6 quotes, and 3 of them were from The House on the Cerulean Sea. So I think that also speaks to how much I absolutely love that book. But I did narrow it down to just 2 quotes. First being, perhaps it is always restful to be around someone who does not expect anything from you beyond what is in your nature. And that was from Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. I just thought that was just so lovely. It's like, yeah, just to be 100% yourself and have someone who is just like
accepts you and loves you for the way that you are. Like,
yes, and
truly are. Yeah.
And that and because I said that I think I said that they were one of my favorite. I don't know. I mentioned the dynamic between those characters, and that kind of really truly encompasses their dynamic. Is they are super quirky characters, but they truly just accept each other.
That's really nice.
So lovely.
That is lovely.
And the last one, I just found this so hilarious, and maybe this is just me.
No, I've been reading that and like stifling my laughter.
And it goes, he could not believe it was only Wednesday, and it was made worse when he realized it was actually Tuesday. I lost it when I read it.
So relatable. Oh, that sinking sensation. Like, what? It's only Tuesday?
And that was from The House on the Cerulean Sea. And wonderful. That kind of is just like a snippet of the type of humor that you will find in that book.
I love that. And that wraps up the first ever Perfictionist Book Awards. A huge thank you to all the authors who made this year so memorable with their incredible stories.
Yes, and thank you to all our listeners for joining us on this reading journey. We love to hear your picks for these categories, so don't be shy and share your favorites with us on social media or in the comments.
This has been such a fun way to reflect on 2024, and we can't wait to see what books 2025 has in store.
Until next time, keep reading, keep exploring, and remember, no book is ever truly perfection.
Bye
Bye
for
for
now.
now.